had a lung collapse one time, and I went to the hospital. I decided I'd cut my braids off, so I took a scissors and cut them off. Just left them laying there, and Mark Rotham come in to see me. He said, "How are you doing?" He said, "Well, I don't."
Willie Nelson, a name not only tied to country music, but etched into America's cultural memory as a symbol of pain, endurance, and poetic rebellion. He is an endless wild wind, an artist who turns every note and lyric into a journey through the listener's heart. A wanderer carrying defiance, resilience, and a kind of poetry born only from the miles, dust, and loneliness of America. From tiny stages in Texas to the dazzling lights of Nashville, Willie Nelson rose not as a fleeting sensation, but as part of a nation's collective memory. He gave the world "On the Road Again," a melody that perfectly captured the soul of those who can't stop moving. His talent is undeniable. His influence reaches far beyond music, making him a true cultural icon. But behind the cowboy hat and the gentle smile lies a life with darker corners than any sorrowful ballad. Over more than 7 decades, Willie has walked through betrayal, collapse, scandal, and loss, and still stood tall. He has turned disgrace into dignity and grief into music that mends millions of hearts. At 92, when most have long since stopped, he keeps going, carrying glory alongside secrets never told. The world knows him under the stage lights, but in the life that remains, what he faces now may be the harshest, most haunting chapter of all. In this video, we'll pull back the curtain to where untold truths may make you see Willie Nelson in an entirely different light. Early life. Willie Hugh Nelson was born on April 29, 1933 in Abbott, Texas, a rural town of only a few hundred people, surrounded by cotton fields stretching to the horizon. At the time, Abbott was still struggling in the aftermath of the Great Depression, and every household lived frugally, counting every kernel of corn and every can of beans. Willie entered the world in a small wooden house with no electricity, no running water, only the sound of the wind through the walls and the distant rumble of trains from the far-off tracks. His parents, Ira and Merle, separated when he was too young to remember them ever being happy together. His mother left to seek opportunities elsewhere. His father remarried and also moved away. Willie and his sister Bobby were raised by their grandparents, Alfred and Nancy Nelson, who provided not only physical care but also nourishment for the soul. Nancy played the mandolin and sang hymns, while Alfred loved the guitar and harmonica. They brought music into every meal and every evening by the fire. When Willie was just 6, he was given a cheap Sears Roebuck guitar. No one in the family taught him formally. He learned by watching his grandparents, listening to the radio, and copying the country, blues, and gospel tunes that crackled out of an old speaker. A year later, he wrote his first song, a simple ballad about a schoolboy's crush on a classmate. That was when he realized music wasn't just something to listen to. It was a way to say the things words alone could not. Life at the time was far from easy. Willie picked cotton under the scorching sun, gathered corn, raised chickens, and did odd jobs to help the family. He once sold books door to door and delivered newspapers on a battered bicycle. Every penny earned was precious, and every trip out into the world was a chance to observe people, hear their stories, material that would later shape the raw, honest voice of his songwriting. By the age of 10, Willie was confident enough to perform for adult audiences. On weekend nights, The boy with the cheap guitar could be found at the town hall or roadside bars, singing classic country songs alongside a few of his own compositions. His voice wasn't yet the gravelly tone it would become, but the way he bent notes and played with rhythm was enough to make people pause mid-beer and listen. During high school, he joined a band called the Bohemian Fiddlers with his sister Bobby and a few friends, traveling through small Texas towns to play at weddings, fairs, and cotton harvest festivals. The pay was meager, sometimes just enough for gas or a meal, but Willie saw it as tuition in understanding an audience, when they wanted a sad ballad and when they needed a polka to get them dancing. After graduating in 1950, Willie set the guitar aside temporarily to join the U.S. Air Force, hoping to find a new direction. But chronic pneumonia forced him to leave the service early. Returning to Abbott, he took on whatever work he could find, selling books door to door, working as a local radio DJ, even training horses. Yet no matter the job, the guitar was always nearby, and each night he would write songs. By his teenage years, Willie was already a familiar face at local shows. His voice was still smooth rather than rough, but carried a warmth and rhythmic phrasing all his own. In his mind, Abbott was where everything began, but it was also far too small to contain his dreams. From very early on, Willie knew the road out of that dusty little town would be paved with music. Early career. Willie Nelson didn't step into music through a wide-open door, but through a series of winding back roads, many of which seemed to end in dead ends. In 1956, he paid out of his own pocket to record his first two songs, "The Storm Has Just Begun" and "When I've Sung My Last Hillbilly Song." They made no impact on the charts, but for Willie, they were proof that he had the courage to take his songwriting out of his small room and into the public eye. With no record label willing to take him on, he roamed across Texas carrying a few demo tapes, hoping to find someone who would recognize the potential in his voice and his distinctive writing style. During his time in Fort Worth and later in Portland, Oregon, Willie worked as a DJ for small radio stations. The job broadened his knowledge of country, bluegrass, jazz, and even pop, genres he would later blend together with skill. More importantly, it taught him how to control an audience's mood, from the tone of his voice to the choice of songs, a skill he would masterfully apply on stage in the years to come. In the early 1960s, strapped for cash, Willie sold the rights to his song Family Bible for just $50, a decision he would both regret and regard as a costly but invaluable lesson. When Claude Gray's recording of the song became a hit, Willie realized that Nashville might close its doors to an unknown singer, but it would always open them for songs that could touch the listener's heart. Determined, he returned to Texas and secured a small foothold at the Esquire Ballroom, one of Houston's hottest country music venues. The owner, Larry Butler, not only paid him but also got him a DJ job, allowed him to perform regularly, and connected him with bigger musicians and producers. This was also when Willie wrote songs like Nightlife, which would go on to be recorded many times, proving that his songwriting talent extended far beyond the borders of local music scenes. 1961 marked a turning point when Hank Cochran, a renowned songwriter, happened to hear one of Willie's demos and immediately brought him to Pamper Music in Nashville. Within weeks, he had signed a professional songwriting contract and quickly caught the attention of Liberty Records. That same year, he released Willingly, a duet with his then-wife Shirley Colley, and Touch Me, both of which reached the top 10 on the country charts. However, These recordings were shaped by the record labels to fit the polished Nashville sound, which to Willie felt like wearing a suit that didn't fit. His rough-edged voice, laid-back timing, intimate delivery, and lyrics layered with meaning were all muted beneath smooth orchestration. This period was both proof that he could succeed and the beginning of a simmering conflict between his personal identity and the market's taste. A tension that would go on to define the musical revolution Willie would lead in the years ahead. The career breakthrough. The 1970s marked the dividing line in Willie Nelson's career. Before it, a long stretch boxed into convention. After it, the years when he truly became an icon. The turning point wasn't luck. It came from a strategic decision. Leaving Nashville, where he had spent years colliding with the demands of the polished Nashville sound, to return to Texas. In Nashville, Willie was constantly asked to smooth out his personality. The voice had to be clean, the timing had to follow the textbook, the arrangements had to be lush enough for radio. But Willie was born to tell stories in his own heartbeat's rhythm. Loose timing, whispered delivery, frankness, and sometimes a roughness sharp enough to make you flinch. Staying would have meant remaining a talented but confined name. So he left. At that time, Austin was transforming into a sanctuary for outsider music. Gone were pre-written studio assignments and the label's heavy hand. Austin offered stages where artists could experiment, fail, and try again, as long as it was honest. Here, Willie found what he needed most: creative freedom. Equally important, he found an audience Nashville could never reach. People who wanted real stories, who valued rawness over gloss, and who were willing to follow an artist down uncharted roads. Austin gave him an audience, a spirit, and a foundation to redraw his career map. It was here that the seeds of outlaw country, a rebellious undercurrent within country music, were planted and began to grow. Outlaw country wasn't a marketing gimmick. It was an attitude toward making music, rejecting formulas, rejecting the producer's command, returning the storytelling to the artist's hands. Willie and his like-minded friend Waylon Jennings pulled country music out of air-conditioned studios and back into bars, highways, and everyday tales about outsiders, broken love, loss, and the hunger for freedom. They stripped away the makeup the industry considered essential, revealing the bare skin of the song. What the industry called rough, audiences called right. That collision created a phenomenon. Outlaw country hit the airwaves, entered festivals, and became the voice of a generation tired of music that pretended everything was perfect. In this context, 1973 saw the release of Shotgun Willie. No one expected it to shake the charts, and indeed it didn't explode in sales. But Shotgun Willie worked quietly in its own way. It repositioned Willie in the eyes of both audiences and the industry. Loose arrangements, the feeling of playing live instead of recording in a glass box, and an unpolished vocal delivery all announced. This was the music Nelson wanted to make. Whiskey River from the album quickly became his signature stage opener, a ritual that brought the whole room to its feet, signaling they were about to hear the story in Willie's way, not radio's. From here, his shows in Austin and nearby cities began drawing noticeably larger crowds. Local press named him a flag bearer of the new wave, and national critics stopped referring to him as just a songwriter for others, instead calling him a performer with philosophy and vision. 2 years later came Red-Headed Stranger, 1975, a drill straight into the heart of an industry obsessed with spectacle. This was a concept album telling a complete story, a man traveling through the emotional desert of his own life, loving, losing, struggling, seeking redemption. What shocked the industry wasn't the story, but how it was told. No string sections for grandeur, no pounding drums for drama, no layers of instruments to mask emotion, mostly just guitar, piano, and Willie's voice up close. Columbia Records initially doubted it. Could simple mean lacking? But Nelson knew what he was after. Strip away the noise so the listener could hear the heart. When Red-Headed Stranger was released, the public answered for the label. It sold strongly and earned critical acclaim. When Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain emerged as the standout single, winning him the Grammy for Best Male Country Vocal, any debate over Simple became irrelevant. Its success was a verdict. Country didn't need a safety net to hit the heart. From that milestone on, Willie's trajectory changed completely. He no longer had to chase the label's quotas or polish what didn't need polishing. His tour schedule grew dense, with outdoor shows running late into the night and sold-out halls. On stage, his signature pairing, the red bandana and the worn-out guitar, combined with his whisper storytelling style to create an experience unlike any other. Not a performance, but a direct conversation with each person in the audience. Whiskey River opened the night. Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain closed it. And between those 2 points, the audience traveled with him through the shared memoryscape of America. Small towns, long roads, love stories, good and bad. This new stature opened another door: film. The Electric Horseman, 1979, brought him to the screen alongside major stars. Honeysuckle Rose, 1980, let him carry the image of a touring musician straight into cinema. The remarkable thing was that Willie didn't try to act. He stepped into the frame with his natural rhythm, slow, warm, sometimes playful, but always carrying a faint layer of sadness. Audiences didn't watch him on screen for technique, but to see the real person, a major reason his roles worked. With film, Willie didn't change careers. He expanded his storytelling into another language, still telling tales of the road, the stage, and the fragile bond between artist and audience. Throughout the 1980s, Willie continued to top the charts with recordings true to himself and toured with the intensity of a rock band's schedule. But the deepest mark of this era lay in his spirit of camaraderie. Alongside Waylon Jennings, Johnny Cash, and Kris Kristofferson, he formed the Highwaymen, a musical alliance where each member was a star in his own right, but together they formed a constellation that couldn't be replicated. Highwayman sounded like an anthem for men who had lived through different trials but still looked toward the same free sky. Desperados waiting for a train, told of drifters waiting for a train that might never come. These songs didn't just climb charts, they took on lives of their own, sung in Western bars, at family gatherings, and on long drives, a kind of America singing to itself. At the height of this glory, Willie did something that proved why he was not just a rebellious artist, but also a man of his community. In 1985, he co-founded Farm Aid, a large-scale benefit concert series aimed at raising funds and awareness for America's struggling farmers. To Willie, farmers weren't distant audiences. They were the people who had sustained the market for country music, the real faces behind the fields he had passed on tour. Farm Aid was not a fashionable charity project, but a promise from a free artist to his community to face real problems with real action. From the Farm Aid stage, People heard familiar songs, but more importantly, they saw that music could mobilize resources, influence policy, and force society to look at those often forgotten. So what about you? In this era of Willie Nelson's life, what impressed you most? His boldness in music, or his refusal to bow to the rigid rules of tradition? Leave a comment to share your thoughts, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel to keep exploring the fascinating stories of Willie Nelson and other music legends. Personal life. Yet behind the bright stage lights and the string of hits that conquered audiences, Willie Nelson's private life was a very different story. One where passionate affairs, turbulent marriages, and fractures that never fully healed ran alongside his triumphant musical journey. Willie Nelson met Martha Matthews in the early 1950s, when he was just in his early 20s and still struggling to make a living through various jobs, from manual labor to working as a DJ at small local radio stations. Martha was a spirited young woman from Texas, drawn to Willie's humor, wanderer's charm, and burning passion for music. The two quickly fell into the whirlwind of a youthful romance. Simple dates filled with laughter, and summer nights when Willie would serenade Martha on his guitar. In 1952, when Willie's music career had yet to take shape, the couple decided to marry. It was a sweet beginning, but also a challenging one. Money was tight, jobs were unstable, and the pressure of providing for a family loomed large. Over their 10 years together, they had 3 children, Lana, Susie, and Billy, their greatest pride and the only real bond holding them together through their most turbulent periods. However, their marriage soon became overshadowed by growing conflicts. Willie's rambling lifestyle, often away from home playing in bars and clubs, left Martha feeling abandoned. She was hot-tempered and outspoken, while Willie was easygoing and not adept at handling domestic disputes. Arguments that began over money, time, and responsibilities gradually escalated into fierce confrontations. Many stories about these fights were later shared by Willie's friends and colleagues, but the most infamous was the time Martha, in a fit of rage, tied Willie up in a blanket and beat him with a broom handle. The incident became a notorious symbol of the tension and volatility in their relationship, a clear sign that they had lost the respect and empathy once shared. Despite their differences, they tried several times to reconcile for the sake of their children. But with the pressures of Willie's emerging career, ongoing financial instability, and deep-seated personality clashes, the gap between them only widened. By 1962, after a decade of storms, Willie and Martha officially divorced. The marriage left a lasting mark on Willie Nelson's music. Songs heavy with sadness and nostalgia for lost love became more frequent in the years that followed, as if he were pouring out and preserving emotions that had never been fully resolved. It also served as a reminder that behind the image of a music legend are the very human scars of everyday life, sometimes deeper than any note he ever sang. After Willie Nelson's first marriage to Martha Matthews ended in the early 1960s, he entered a new phase of his career in Nashville. It was there that he met Shirley Colley, a country singer with a sweet voice and a solid place in the industry. They became acquainted while taking part in recording sessions and performing for radio shows. Their musical chemistry quickly turned into personal attraction. The two were swept into a romance that was both romantic and professionally exciting. In 1963, Willie and Shirley married. This was not only a personal milestone, but also a turning point in Willie's career, as he now had a life partner who was also an artist, someone who understood and shared the pressures of the profession. They often appeared together on stage, most notably with the duet Willingly, Willie's first song to reach the top 10 on the country charts, a key milestone that helped him make his mark in Nashville. However, harmony on stage didn't translate into harmony at home. A packed touring schedule, the stresses of the job, and Shirley's strong, outspoken personality led to increasing friction. By this time, Willie was beginning to taste success and was also being drawn into a more reckless lifestyle that included extramarital affairs. The breaking point came in the late 1960s. One day, Shirley received a hospital bill in the mail. What shocked her was not just the amount, but the fact that the patient was listed as Connie Kupke, and next to her name was the note, "Gave birth to a child for Willie Nelson." The discovery was like a knife that severed what little trust remained between them. The marriage officially ended in 1971, closing nearly a decade of both collaboration and conflict. Though it ended in bitterness, Shirley Collie left an indelible mark on Willie Nelson's journey as the partner who stood with him during his first major turning point in Nashville and helped pave the way for the hits that would fuel his later success. Willie Nelson's third marriage began with the very affair that had ended his relationship with Shirley Collie. Willie met Connie Kupke in Texas during a gathering of friends and fellow musicians. Connie was young, beautiful, free-spirited, and passionate about music, instantly drawn to Willie's charm, humor, and devil-may-care attitude. From late-night conversations that stretched into the early hours, the two quickly entered into a romantic relationship, even though Willie was still legally married to Shirley at the time. Initially, the affair was kept secret, but when Connie became pregnant, it could no longer be hidden. The truth came out in a way no one expected. A hospital bill from Texas arrived at Shirley's home, stating that Connie had just given birth to a baby girl, and naming Willie Nelson as the father. The incident not only caused an uproar in Willie's personal life, but also sent shockwaves through the Nashville music scene, which was accustomed to his rebellious image, but had never witnessed such an explicit scandal. Shortly after divorcing Shirley in 1971, Willie married Connie, officially making the woman at the center of his affair his legal wife. During this period, Willie entered the peak of his career with the outlaw country movement and a string of celebrated albums. Connie became his anchor at home, accepting the constant life on the road, traveling with him on tours, and raising their two daughters, Paula Carleen Nelson and Amy Lee Nelson, amid Willie's grueling work schedule. However, Willie's freewheeling nature and love for partying did not change. Months-long tours, coupled with fresh rumors of romantic entanglements, gradually eroded Connie's trust. Though she repeatedly forgave him and tried to keep the peace for the sake of their children, arguments grew more intense and prolonged. The distance between them was no longer just geographical, it was emotional. Willie immersed himself in the stage and fleeting relationships, while Connie increasingly felt like she was merely a peripheral figure in her husband's life. After nearly 2 decades together, a journey filled with passion, partnership, fatigue, and hurt, Connie Kupke decided to walk away. In 1988, they divorced, closing a long and turbulent chapter. Despite the separation, Connie maintained an amicable relationship with Willie for the sake of their children, and she remains remembered by the public as the woman who stood beside him through the most glorious period of his career, enduring and accepting things that not everyone could. After his marriage to Connie Kupke ended, Willie Nelson entered a new chapter in both his career and personal life. And that was when Annie D'Angelo came into the picture. Annie was a professional makeup artist in the film industry, and they first met in the late 1980s on the set of a movie in which Willie was acting. Unlike his previous relationships, this one didn't begin at a loud party or in the music world's backstage, but through simple, unhurried conversations, where Willie found in Annie a sense of calm, practicality, and a different perspective on life. Willie later admitted that Annie came into his life at a time when he needed a safe harbor more than a new adventure. At that point, he was still a country music legend, but was also facing intense pressures, from financial troubles and massive tax debts to his hard-to-break partying habits. Annie was not only a life partner, but also a confidant, unafraid to point out the boundaries Willie needed to set for himself. They married in 1991, and Annie quickly became a key factor in helping Willie regain stability. She introduced new principles, from financial management and healthier eating to cutting back on the endless parties. The couple had 2 sons together, Lucas Autry Nelson and Jacob Micah Nelson. Both followed careers in music and often perform alongside their father, creating the image of a close-knit artistic family, a stark contrast to the fractures and distance of Willie's earlier marriages. What stands out is that Annie stood by Willie through some of his most difficult times, particularly during the infamous 1990 tax case, when he faced debts of over $16 million and nearly lost almost all of his assets. Instead of walking away, Annie worked with Willie to find solutions, including releasing the album The IRS Tapes, Who Will Buy My Memories, to help pay off the debt. She also encouraged him to adopt a healthier lifestyle, helping maintain his well-being so he could keep touring well into his 80s. Today, Willie and Annie have been together for over 3 decades, longer than the combined length of his 3 previous marriages. For Willie, this is not just a marriage, but a lasting relationship, a place where he has found peace after years of turbulence. Annie D'Angelo is remembered not merely as Willie Nelson's last wife, but as an essential part of his life, helping him maintain his artistry and continue making his mark on music to this very day. Personal tragedies. By the 1990s, with his marriage to Annie D'Angelo giving him a steady anchor, Willie Nelson thought he had finally found peace after a lifetime of upheaval. But fate would test him again with heartbreaking losses. On Christmas Day in 1991, tragedy struck when Billy, his son with his first wife, Martha Matthews, took his own life at the age of 33 after years of struggling with alcoholism. The shock nearly broke Willie. At the time, Billy had been working on a gospel album, Peace in the Valley, with his father, but his sudden death turned the project into a posthumous release. Willie later issued the album under the title The Gospel Truth as a farewell, each note carrying the deep pain carved into a father's heart. From that point on, Willie's voice took on an added layer of melancholy, and his tradition of performing during Christmas was forever altered, each holiday season becoming a quiet wound that reminded him of the loss. The grief within the family slowly settled, but in 2012, Willie discovered he had a daughter he had never known about, Renee, the result of a past relationship. Meeting Renee also meant gaining a granddaughter and a great-grandchild, a late-in-life joy that reminded him life could still bring unexpected gifts amid its losses. But the string of sorrows did not end there. In 2020, he lost Paul English, not only his drummer but also his bodyguard, backstage manager, and road companion for more than half a century. Paul had always stood behind Willie on stage, keeping time for the music. And when the lights went out, he was the one shielding his friend from the troubles of life on the road. Paul's passing left a quiet emptiness behind the drum kit that had once beat like the heart of the band. Every time Willie stepped on stage after that, he knew no one would be standing in that spot, looking at him with the understanding of every lyric before it was sung. 2 years later, in 2022, the pain doubled when Bobby, his sister, and musical soulmate since childhood, passed away. Bobby was not just his sibling. She was the first person to share his love for music, from their days playing together in a small-town church to standing side by side on major stages. Losing her was like losing a piece of his past, a part of the memory of youth and the very roots of his music. By 2024, the final blow closed an era. Kris Kristofferson, his friend and bandmate in the Highwaymen, died. Kris had been 1/4 of the legendary quartet alongside Johnny Cash, Waylon Jennings, and Willie, and together they had written some of country music's brightest chapters. With Kris's passing, Willie became the Last Highwayman, the final traveler still standing on that old road, looking back to find himself alone among the empty spaces where friends once stood, the golden age now surviving only in memory and old recordings. Legal troubles and the real-life outlaw image. While the private losses still left gaps that could never fully be filled, Willie Nelson was hit by another storm, this time from the federal government. In the early 1990s, envelopes from the IRS began to pile up. Disallowed deductions, good investments that turned out to be mistakes, mounting back taxes, penalties, and interest that pushed his debt to over $32 million. For an artist still touring regularly, this wasn't just a number. It was a verdict that could wipe out an entire lifetime's work. When the IRS moved to seize his assets, the process was as cold and procedural as bureaucracy could be. One by one, his properties were locked up. Real estate, recording studios, memorabilia, even deeply personal items that felt like extensions of the artist himself. Trigger, his beloved guitar worn with decades of fingerprints, came dangerously close to being auctioned off. Word that it might be seized spread like a red alert among his friends and crew. Trigger was secured just in time, but the feeling of watching your life reduced to a list of assets to be liquidated cut deep. For Willie, it wasn't just about losing possessions. It was the threat of losing his very voice. In what seemed like a hopeless situation, Willie chose to deal with it in the most Willie Nelson way possible, by turning trouble into music. He recorded the IRS tapes, Who'll Buy My Memories, a stripped-down album, almost 2 people in a room, just him and his guitar, recounting memories, confronting his financial missteps, and selling it directly to fans with the promise that all proceeds would go toward paying his tax debt. No big promotional campaign, no elaborate excuses. Just an artist standing before the public admitting he was in a bind and asking to sing his way out. What happened next felt like a test of trust, and the American public answered. Orders for tapes and CDs poured in, many including extra money beyond the listed price. His shows stayed packed, his mailbox overflowed with letters of support. The Sing to Pay Off Debt effort didn't erase the entire mountain overnight, but it brought the number down from $32 million to around $6 million. A figure Willie could finish paying off by 1993. When the IRS finally closed the case, Willie had preserved both his dignity and his artistic soul. And Trigger was still there, ready to ring out the notes that had become a symbol. But Willie's outlaw image wasn't cemented by the tax story alone. It was forged through a long history of run-ins with the law over marijuana, something he's always been blunt about as part of his life. In 1974 and again in 1977, his name appeared in headlines for possession arrests. He paid the fines, laughed it off on stage, and kept playing. 2 decades later, as America still argued over legalization, Willie found himself in more trouble in 2006, and, most famously, in 2010, when Texas police searched his tour bus and found about 6 ounces of marijuana. The case turned into legend when a local prosecutor suggested Willie could sing a song in court to get a reduced sentence, a proposal that sparked media frenzy before being firmly rejected by the judge as inappropriate. Even so, the episode only deepened his public image, an artist who didn't dodge, didn't dramatize, treating it all as part of the very real life of a road musician. Through each run-in, Willie chose to face the situation rather than run from it. He openly supported legalization, publicly debated its pros and cons, and perhaps most importantly, made marijuana part of his personal brand. The image of Willie with braided hair, a red bandana, and a joint became a kind of pop iconography, at once countercultural and deeply American. As the legalization movement gained momentum, Willie didn't stand on the sidelines. He entered the legal cannabis business, seeing it as both a revenue stream and a platform to change public perception, a cause he had championed for decades. Even in his later years, he held to the same belief. The law might change slowly, but culture can change faster if people are willing to live openly by what they believe. The IRS ordeal revealed the most vulnerable side of an artist's life: complex finances, bad advice, and how a single signature could burn through a lifetime's earnings. The marijuana arrests showed the most candid side. Willie never put up a wall between his private self and his public image. Together they formed a consistent portrait. Willie Nelson didn't play the role of an outlaw. He lived it, paid for it when he was wrong, stood his ground when he needed to, and turned every stumble into material to keep singing. That's why, after the IRS storm, the public didn't turn away. They saw in him something rare, a legend who could admit mistakes and save himself with the only thing he'd had from the start: his music. And that's why, every time Trigger rang out in the years that followed, audiences weren't just hearing wood and strings. They were hearing the story of a man who had once stood outside the shuttered windows of the tax office, who had once sat on a courtroom bench over a bag of marijuana, and who still stepped onto the stage that same night to sing "Who'll Buy My Memories," as both a self-reflection and an invitation. These memories, the beautiful and the flawed, who will buy them? Who will keep them? Who will understand them? For Willie Nelson, the answer was always clear: his audience. They bought them, they kept them, they understood, and they helped him through, so he could keep living as a real-life outlaw, but one who never forgot to be grateful. Health and the silent battle. On the outside, Willie Nelson still carries the image of country music's immortal traveler: silver hair in braids, a gentle yet mischievous gaze, and Trigger always slung over his shoulder. But behind the stage curtain, he has fought a silent battle for decades, one that has left deep marks on both his body and spirit. His smoking habit began when he was just 6 years old, a childhood where cigarette smoke was woven into every breath, part of rural Texas life at the time. Years of life on the road, endless late-night shows, and smoking marijuana took a heavy toll on Willie's respiratory system. In his later years, doctors diagnosed him with emphysema, a chronic obstructive lung disease, and he suffered a collapsed lung, making it difficult to breathe even while standing still, let alone sing for hours under hot stage lights. In 2015, Willie decided to undergo stem cell surgery, a cutting-edge medical procedure aimed at regenerating and repairing damaged lung tissue. The operation was a success, improving his breathing and proving he had never given up the fight to keep living fully through music. But Willie also understood that decades of smoking tobacco and marijuana had taken more from him than he'd ever imagined. After the surgery, he quit smoking entirely, both cigarettes and marijuana, and switched to using edibles as a way to relax and maintain his habit without further damaging his lungs. Alongside giving up smoke, Willie made decisive lifestyle changes. He began practicing yoga, eating organic foods, walking daily, and maintaining a meditation routine, not just to preserve his physical health, but also to nurture inner peace. At dawn on his ranch, he would stroll through open fields, inhaling the fresh air as if making up for the years he had lost. Even so, Willie's health is no longer what it once was. The voice that once rolled across Texas plains like the wind is now raspier, his breath shorter. Yet each time he steps onto the stage, he still sings with his whole heart, holding long notes about love, freedom, and sorrow as if age and illness were nothing more than meaningless numbers. Willie has often said, "If I stop singing, I'll start aging immediately." And perhaps it is that very belief that has kept him standing, carrying Trigger and the story of his life down every road, even as his body has long been whispering its fatigue. Legacy and influence. Willie Nelson leaves behind a legacy that goes far beyond impressive numbers, like more than 70 studio albums, dozens of Grammy Awards, or his enduring presence on the charts. He is an American cultural icon, an artist who changed the face of country music and expanded its reach far beyond Southern grandstands. At a time when Nashville was dominated by the polished sound of record labels, Willie, with his raw, unvarnished, and sometimes defiant style, proved that audiences were not only looking for technical perfection, but also craved authenticity and real-life storytelling in every melody. The birth and rise of the outlaw country movement, which he led alongside Waylon Jennings, opened a new path for entire generations of artists, from Kris Kristofferson and Emmylou Harris to younger voices like Sturgill Simpson and Casey Musgraves. Willie's influence reaches far beyond music. He turned the outlaw image into a real-life brand, a man who dared to stand up to the IRS when he owed over $32 million, who openly used marijuana and turned it into a legal business, who spoke out about politics, the environment, and farmers' rights. Farm Aid, the music event he co-founded, is not just a fundraising festival. It has become a symbol of unity and resilience for America's farmers, sustained for over 4 decades thanks to his influence and commitment. But perhaps Willie's greatest legacy lies in how he lives and creates. In his 90s, he still records, still performs dozens of shows each year, still practices yoga every morning to keep his breath strong, and still takes time to speak with fans after every performance. He inspires millions with the very message his life embodies, that true passion never grows old, and creative freedom is never up for negotiation. Willie Nelson is not only the last highwayman, the final traveler of the legendary quartet, but also a bridge connecting country music's golden past with its diverse present. Each time he picks up Trigger, his time-worn voice carries listeners back to bygone years, while affirming that the Willie Nelson story is far from over. And perhaps his true legacy will continue to echo, not only through his recordings, but in the spirit of freedom, resilience, and humanity he has sown deep into the heart of an entire culture. Current life today, at 92, Willie Nelson still chooses to live in the rhythm of the stage. He keeps his touring schedule in tune with his physical condition, but his way of appearing hasn't changed. No set list, just playing and telling stories, letting the audience decide where he'll go next in the night. In 2024, Willie returned to the studio to launch a new creative cycle. On May 31st, he released The Border, produced by Buddy Cannon. 10 songs, 4 co-written by Willie with Cannon and 6 selected from contemporary songwriters such as Rodney Crowell, Sean Camp, and Mike Reed. The title track, The Border, plays as both a borderland story and a self-reflection from a man who has spent half a century on the road, reaffirming that at 91, he still holds fast to his role as a storyteller through song. On November 1st, 2024, he followed with Last Leaf on the Tree, a project curated and produced by his son Micah, threading together covers of Beck, Tom Waits, Neil Young, and Nina Simone, alongside a new track co-written with Micah. The Last Leaf concept wasn't a PR slogan, but an emotional through line, facing finitude with the composure of someone who still has things to say, and saying them with the calm voice of age. The album drew praise for avoiding showiness, instead pulling up a chair on the porch and singing as if in the late afternoon light. The year 2025 opened with a milestone worthy of his 92nd birthday. On April 25th, Willie released Oh What a Beautiful World, his 77th album, entirely composed of Rodney Crowell's songs, once again produced by Buddy Cannon. Crowell wasn't just being honored, he also joined in on harmonies for the title track, turning the project into a dialogue between two Texas friends who had shared decades of history. Willie's choice of one songwriter, one album, reflected his continued commitment to digging into the core of songwriting, putting the words at the center, letting his time-weathered voice do the work of memory. After the studio comes the road. Summer. 2025 marks the 10th anniversary of the Outlaw Music Festival, with its route expanded across the Northeast and Midwest. Willie Nelson and family and Bob Dylan anchor the tour, with the familiar timetable: Dylan from 8:05 to 9:20 p.m., Willie from 9:50 to 10:50 p.m. The no setlist format remains. Willie follows the audience's lead, while Trigger, his worn, wood-bodied guitar, serves as the compass. On July 4, 2025, Willie brought his 4th of July picnic home to Austin. The Germania Insurance Amphitheater was packed. The stage lineup included Bob Dylan, Robert Plant and Alison Krauss, Maren Morris, Mavis Staples, and Celebs. The event, Willie's own festival since 1973, is now positioned as both a ritual of remembrance and a reminder that every summer spent in Texas is another summer he still stands in the heart of the community that nurtured country music. The fall closes with the 40th anniversary of Farm Aid, the Farmers Benefit Festival Willie co-founded in 1985. On September 20th, 2025, Huntington Bank Stadium in Minneapolis will host a generational lineup. From the founding quartet, Willie, Neil Young, John Mellencamp, Dave Matthews, to Billy Strings, Nathaniel Rateliff, and the Night Sweats, Wynonna Judd, Trampled by Turtles, Waxahachie, and more. At Farm Aid, Willie is not just playing the part of a legend, he is the keeper of the flame, present, calling for action, proving that music can sustain a movement when it's tied to the real lives of farmers. Outside of releases and touring, Willie's current life is defined by quiet discipline. He has quit cigarettes and all forms of smoking, switching to edibles to protect his lungs after medical intervention. His mornings begin with yoga, meditation, and walks around his Texas ranch. His meals are organic, sourced from family-run operations. He stays open to the present. In mid-2025, the Associated Press described him as still not done, preparing to resume touring with Dylan while also launching a new product, Willie's Remedy Plus, in the legal cannabis market, a personal brand that has grown into a business. On stage, the family lineup has been rejuvenated. His sons Lucas and Micah stand beside him, Mickey Raphael is still there with his harmonica, and the musical airs of the original members keep the rhythm going. From the dusty bar rooms of Texas to the brightly lit stages across America and the world, Willie Nelson has traveled more than 7 decades of music without ever once stopping in his tracks. He has lived exactly like the songs he writes, free-spirited, resilient, and unflinchingly honest. Every note, every lyric is a fragment of his life, carrying joy, sorrow, loss, and an unshakable yearning for freedom that nothing can bind. At over 90 years old, Willie has nothing left to prove to the world. He still stands there, cradling his worn old trigger, his voice raspy yet warm, telling audiences the story of a lifetime, the life of a man, the life of an artist. He leaves behind not only a vast treasure of music, but also an enduring example of perseverance, of living fully for one's passion, and of staying true to oneself, even when the road is stormy. Willie Nelson is more than just a name. He is an icon, a part of America's soul. And as long as his guitar still rings out, the story of this Last Highwayman will continue to be told, inspiring future generations with the truth that there are roads meant only for those who dare to follow them to the very end. If Willie Nelson's story has touched you, leave your thoughts in the comments. What is it about him that you admire most? His talent, his outlaw spirit, or his timeless endurance? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so we can continue exploring the untold chapters of music legends, where every video is a journey bringing you closer to their hearts and souls.